It is 11 minutes past 11 here on the Daily Discourse. Welcome to the third hour of our program. Lovely to be with you. I am Joanne Joseph. And of course, we have a very special next hour coming up. It's Women's Month. And we thought it a wonderful opportunity to showcase the work of powerful women driving change in our society. Nomsa Chabeli is one such woman. She took over as SABC Group CEO in March 2024. And she spent the last 2 years and a bit repositioning the organization to take its place as the foremost broadcasting organization on the continent. But as with any top job, this doesn't only require acumen, it requires a love for media, also a sense of humanity that has to permeate the work of a public broadcaster dedicated to serving its people. Nomsa Chabeli, welcome to the Daily Discourse on SAfm. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you, Joanne. It's such a privilege to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. Well, I don't know if anyone has asked you, but what have the last couple of years been like at the helm of the SABC?
It's been quite a journey being at the helm of the SABC, and as you saw, when you introduced it, SABC plays a very critical role in South Africa's society. SABC is a very complex organization with a very complex history.
True.
And the reality is that it's an institution that is challenged in so many ways, in a sense that it exists in a media sector that is highly disrupted by modern, technology and digital transformation. But yet the SABC, in terms of its structure, has never really transformed, in a sense that we are legislated by the Broadcasting Act that is archaic and outdated. But we live in a modern world where the modern consumer, the modern content consumer has changed. Audiences have changed. Audiences consume content from a multi-platform perspective.
Yes.
But one has come into an institution with such a strong legacy, with such strong brands, and with amazing people. So there's the much positive side, but there's also the complexity that requires, investment ahead of the curve and a different thinking process.
I mean, we see this high-powered woman going about her business from day to day, but we don't often give much thought to where it all began for you. And I understand you grew up in Soweto. I'm curious to know what it was like being raised in a place that is such a bastion of history. It has seen a sense of community unfold, but also it was a place of much turbulence for many years in this country. What was it like growing up there?
So the reality is that I grew up in Rockville in Soweto,
Mm-hmm.
and you can imagine as a youngster, that's all I knew, in a sense that was the community in which, strengthened me. I learned a lot from my neighbors. I grew up in a very neighborly organization. I went to school, in primary school, and I tell my children that I used to walk for a good 8 kilometers probably every day to school and walk back in the afternoon. And strangely, I never felt unsafe, which is some of the challenges that we face here today. Today, I don't think I'd allow my children to walk for such a distance.
True.
But every morning and every afternoon, I walked with my siblings, with my neighbors, that distance to go from Rockville to basically, at some point, to White City, where I did my primary schooling, and then also, to Mulapo, when I was, in a higher primary, as they call it. And I grew up in an amazing community of Rockville. Rockville has produced some of South Africa's greatest leaders.
Yes,
and I think that's the funny part. We always, talk about it to say we grew up not realizing what was surrounding us.
Yeah. What is it about Rockville that produces
I think it's in the water. But I think it's in the people who led us. It's in our parents who were very committed, who were very resilient. I was talking to someone yesterday and I said, I have the honor of having had 2 very strong grandmothers on both sides. I'm named after my paternal grandmother, and she was an amazing woman, entrepreneurial. My grandmother never worked for anyone in her life, so I often wondered how she made it, but she was a hustler in those days. she made clothing, she sold clothes, and so that's where I grew up. And I had amazing siblings. My parents got divorced later on when I was around 13. But because of just the strength of my family, of my aunts, my mother, I became the person I am today. And I always say I was surrounded by very strong women.
Yeah.
That's what I know about women of character, women who never gave up. And that's basically the people who brought me up, who made me who I am today.
And they imprint that on you, don't they? They imprint their sense of independence, their ethics, their resilience. Tell me about that curiosity in you that developed and was encouraged in the family in which you grew up, because you were obviously a smart kid.
So my father was a very hard taskmaster. My father never accepted you coming number two. And it was very difficult, I think, because I might maybe have been smart to a certain extent, but I was very shy and very withdrawn. And my dad didn't really suffer fools gladly, and he was very hard, and because he just didn't understand where the shyness came from. Yes. Whilst the sibling who came after me was a very social person. So it was like chalk and cheese. So even today in Rockville, when you say, oh, Nomsa, they say, oh, Ntabiseng's sister.
Really?
I kid you not.
Even after you became GCEO of the SABC?
I think it's still a joke in the neighborhood, because I think people look at it and they know this scrawny, tiny, shy young girl, So for them to basically look at the trajectory, it makes them very proud. But it's a history that you can't shake. But it's also a history that makes me proud. It makes me smile. So that's literally how, I was brought up, in a sense that, so with my shyness, I had books. So that's where I spent most of my time. I read a lot. And I remember I entered a competition. We used to have the readathon. It was sponsored, and I remember going to my teacher and complaining about the books she had chosen for me, because I wanted the easier books that everybody had. And she said to me, are you telling me you can't read this book? You've got the weekend, and on Monday let's discuss it. And I went on to win the readathon. It was a national competition. And I think that's where my curiosity has always been. I realized that you could actually escape your circumstance by burying your nose in a book.
Absolutely.
And you discover a totally new world. And that's what happened. I used to sit and dream of a better life, and that assisted me in terms of just growing, it wasn't for me ambition, it was curiosity and that development of a sense of purpose, realizing that there's something bigger than yourself in life, and wanting to really contribute towards society more than anything. So for me, it was never about just me by myself as a leader. It was about impact and what I could do to better myself and to better the people around me. And that was important to me.
I mean, that is an astonishing moment, right? And one sometimes struggles to pinpoint that moment in your life when you decided, I'm going to be different. I'm going to do something exceptional. It's not always a conscious decision, especially for an introverted person. But once you set yourself on that path, you're suddenly traveling towards something entirely different, aren't you? To a lot of other people around you, let's be honest.
No, it's very true. I think once you realize it, I remember when I was at UCT at the business school, I did a course, I was there for a year, and I recall that we were doing a leadership module, and they were asking us about when did you realize the path that you had chosen? And I was 23 years old, turning 24, and I remember thinking, I haven't yet. Because for me, it was a journey.
Yes.
I still think for me, there's no sense of arrival. Because I think the world is changing so rapidly, and one has to be able to have the agility to change with it.
Yes.
So that's one of the things that drove me. But I think most importantly, Joanne, I grew up in an environment where, to your point, Soweto is a highly storied township, but also we grew up with some serious challenges.
Yeah.
in our communities. And one of the things that really drove me as a person, that made me who I am today, was the observation of people who overcame seemingly insurmountable challenges, the triumph of the human spirit. And that's what drives me. That's genuinely, I think that was what Oprah Winfrey would say, my aha moment.
Yes.
Because I sat back and I thought, who am I to actually complain when I've been so blessed? When I am surrounded by people who are far less than me, but they are more concerned about my success. Now, one of the things I always remember, there was a young boy who used to walk me to the taxi in the morning, because I grew up in a very volatile township, and those who know, then there was something called Jack Roll, where genuinely they used to gang rape women.
Yes.
It was unsafe for you to walk in the street. I mean, my mother said, go and buy bread. I would really be in tears, because I don't know how I would buy the bread and come back without entering in some sort of, having to defend myself with a boy standing at the store. And it could turn very bad. And this, he took it upon himself. And this was not the best young man in the neighborhood. He himself was of questionable character. But for some reason, he liked me. He saw something in me. And he used to walk me every day to the taxi and wait for me in the afternoon. And we'd lost touch as things happened when I went off into my own path in the world. And I one day got a phone call that he'd been shot dead. Gosh. And I remember how devastating that was for me. But also in reflection in terms of the life that we choose. We don't choose where we are born, but we can choose our paths. And that was, for me, such a tragic moment. But I've always had that memory that I am because so many people decided to have an interest in me.
Yes.
And people who decided to trust me when I didn't deserve their trust, people who instilled that confidence in me that made a difference, So, and that's how I reflect on my journey and also my childhood, that I was built by so many people. So in African culture, when we say a child is raised by a village, it's one thing I can genuinely attest to. Because like I say, my parents got divorced and all of a sudden our lives were disrupted. But we managed to carry on. And for me, having those strong grandparents that literally just decided to take over and raise their grandchildren, it's really why I'm sitting here today.
And there are many people, though you are very humble, clearly, and I sense your gratitude for everybody who has invested in you over the course of your life. There are people who are very proud of you out there. One of them is Thebe Ikalefeng. He is, as you know, a brand specialist and a Pan-Africanist at heart. And I think he's proud of the work you've done. And so he's called into the program and he's asked to have a word. So we're going to give him a little bit of airtime. Thebe, good morning to you. And thank you very much for calling into the Daily Discourse. Thank you for joining us for our reflections here on Nomsa Chabeli's life. Thebe, can you hear us? All right, we're having a bit of trouble getting through to Thebe there. Let's come back to him in a moment. But I wanted to talk about this issue of what caused you to develop an interest in business in general and marketing in particular.
So marketing is a passion of mine. I began my career in communications and marketing. And it taught me, how organizations connect with people and how they build trust. So communication taught me the power of storytelling. I love storytelling. Myself, I believe I'm a storyteller. And I think that came from that love of books.
Yes.
So communications taught me that. And marketing taught me how, insights into people and people's behavior. Then I progressed more to the commercial side, where I learned about, building sustainability for organizations. And I think just that journey brought me to where I am today, because I've always loved media. I spent time also, at SuperSport, at MultiChoice.
Yes.
I went on to MTN and into telecommunications, where I genuinely strengthened my commercial aspects. And then obviously then ended up with the public broadcaster, which is not just any media institution, which is really, we are tasked with the public mandate and we are tasked with universal access to inform, educate, and entertain audiences from across South Africa. So that's basically the journey that I've traveled. And I think more than anything, I loved marketing because how do you develop trust? How do you ensure that brands play a very big role in people's lives, in the hearts and minds of people? Because we don't really choose products. That's the interesting part. We choose brands that we associate with at an emotional level.
Yes.
And then how do you develop that emotiveness, particularly in a sector where something is easily available, you're competing on pricing. If you look, for example, at the FMCG sector, at some point in my life, I sold beer. I worked at SA Breweries as the marketing head for Kasselager,
Right.
So just moving through that career and really learning in every institution that I've served and developing my marketing prowess has led me to where I am today. And just understanding how you can utilize and develop brands to impact society, which is very critical. And I think that's the power. I always say that it's a superpower, actually, to be able to do that, because I think genuinely individuals think they choose according to, I suppose, more the utility of a product, when in fact we make emotional choices.
Yes.
So think about yourself when you are deciding what car to buy, for example. I don't think you really care much about the kilowattage of the car, etc. I think, I once said in my younger years, I care about what I look like inside the car. That was like probably 25 years ago. And that's what marketers do. They make us not just have that consideration of pricing, but we make decisions about brand distinction and the role it plays in our lives and how it makes me feel. And for me, that's what's important, I think, even for SABC. SABC plays a massive role in society, and we really drive the mood of the country, Joanne.
Yes.
In terms of people who tune in to us, to listen to what's happening around them, what's happening globally. That can determine how a person feels for the rest of the day, if you think about it. And for me, that was the power of media, the power of influence, the power of utilizing these airwaves to educate and to entertain and to strengthen participation in this country's democracy, which is what we do. I mean, we are just about to go to the local government elections, and we are going to play a very big role in ensuring that people are registered to vote, people are fetching their ID books, people are standing in those queues and making themselves heard, and the role that they play. And for me, that's genuinely the opportunity that I've been given, and to walk into this with authenticity and purpose. And that's why I wake up every day.
Yeah. And I think we've got Tebe back on the line now. I want you to hold that thought, because we've got a lot more to say about your role in the SABC and your leadership here. But let's take that call from Tebe Kalafeng. Tebe, are you with us now?
I am with you. I saw you. I'm watching the both of you. I said my favorite people that I've traveled this world with. You going all the way to the West Africa, and Nomsa going all the way to the ends of this continent as well. Congratulations, Nomsa, first on 90 years of the SABC. And I think this institution couldn't be luckier to have somebody like you at this very important time in its history. So I think it's a beautiful time to have you. I've known Nomsa forever. The first Cricket World Cup CMO, the first Cricket World Cup held in this country, she was at the helm of it as a CMO. Huh. The CMO of South Africa's nation brand. Now the CEO of SABC. So clearly, she is a woman who's called to lead this country at the most important institutions that drive our narrative, that drives our story, and that is why I love about her, because there couldn't have been anybody better. You know, when she talks about purpose and authenticity, that's what we want, and that's what we're getting with her. You can see actually with SABC where it is right now, much more stable. You don't read anything negative about the institution anymore because they've got somebody who understands how important it is to the story of this country.
Tebe Kalafing, beautiful call. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to ask you to jump on that bandwagon with Tebe Kalafing. Send us a voice note or send us a text. Our WhatsApp line is 0614104107, and we'd love to start taking those messages from you. I also want to take a couple of interactions from our audience members here. We haven't actually shown you that we do have an audience here. It's not a huge audience, but it's a quality audience. That's what counts. And so I'm going to ask one or two of the faces that you'd be very familiar with, and certainly the voices that you'd be familiar with, to actually just speak to us a little bit about, or perhaps send a shout out to Nomsa, and perhaps just give us a sense of what it means for her to be the GCEO of the SABC at this point.
Thank you so much, Joanne. You know, I think I'm not the best person for this job today because I spend so much time with Nomsa, but I guess it is also good to tell the people that you interact with every day, you know, how special they are.
No, do you just want to introduce yourself to our audience and tell them who you are, because they may not be familiar.
Thanks, Joanne. You caught me off guard there. It's Nada Wachela, the Group Executive of SABC Radio. And the reason I'm saying I spend a lot of time with Nomsa is because we sit at Exco together. And as I was saying, maybe, you know, we need to take that time to tell the people that we work with, that we interact with all the time, how great they are at what they do. I love what Tebe just said, that since Nomsa took over, we really don't read a lot of things, you know, negative things about the SABC anymore. But, you know, the greatest thing, besides not reading the bad stuff, I think there is a better understanding of what the SABC stands for. You know, our funding challenges, for example. You would meet people who would tell you, why are you not doing this as SABC? You're funded by government anyway. That's our money. It's you know, it's public money. And you would take the pain of explaining that SABC is not funded by government. We only get about 4% of our budget from government and so on. But I'm somehow getting the feeling that a lot of people today understand that the SABC, you know, we do some of the things that we do because we are commercially funded. It is not an ideal thing, but that's where we are, you know. So I am finding that she has been able to get the narrative where it should land, you know, in terms of South Africans and even in government. I was quite surprised listening to an interview by the I think one of the stations was interviewing the chairperson of the portfolio committee on communications, and the way she was explaining the SABC challenges, it was like you're listening to Nomsa. So I was quite proud. I was like, Nomsa has really made, you know, an impact on this woman. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that, Nada. Can we take one more person from our audience? Do we have anyone else? Okay, we've got Angela Ludek. Yes, another very familiar voice to you on SAfm in the early hours.
Good to be with you, Joanne and Nomsa. Really fantastic to have a female lead the SABC, just recognizing that it's pathing away to leadership with everything that you've shared. So I'm interested to see where the SABC is going and how you formidably create that pathway for young ladies to step into their roles, for it to be more inclusive. Not that we are neglecting men in the industry, but it has been a predominantly male-driven industry, and I think that is exciting. And so is the future of how we interface digital within the SABC's spectrum of work.
All right. So let's actually respond to some of those questions if we can, Nada. I'm going to get to the issue, Nomsa, we're going to get to the issue, Nada's issue of funding in a moment. But let's start off with that. And I want to also couch it within this question. Because I heard Stephen Groote speak about this on his show with Kathy Motlahlana this morning, the breakfast show. And they spoke about, firstly, the issue of the people inside the SABC. This is people who keep the show on the road every day, thousands of people who come to work faithfully and keep those broadcasts on air, wall to wall, right, 24 hours a day. And those people are very wounded by some of the happenings in this organization in the last few years. I think what was mentioned was the Hlaudi Motsoeneng era, and the damage that was done to people from an emotional point of view. How do we start by looking after the staff within the SABC, nurturing them, making sure their needs are met from a resource point of view, from a financial point of view, but also, restoring them to a place where they truly identify with this brand and believe in it as much as you do?
So I think that's a very important question. Thanks for that, Joanne. I think what's important is one of the key things I've been deliberately instilling in the last 2 years is leading with trust. I think a lot of the time when we talk about leadership, we talk about authority. But I tend to think we need to reframe that and talk more about how do we lead with trust? How do we take people with us? How do we come into environments, to your point, that have been through such a complex and challenging period and go in there and say to them, let's rebase, let's gain an understanding of why we are here and how we work together to take this institution forward. From my perspective, I always think that one has to lead also with dialogue and conversation. One of the key things I've done is really try and have, dialogue with our employees in terms of where we are and where we are going as an institution. So, for example, one of the key things that we did with the board is that we developed a 5-year strategy for the SABC, taking into consideration our competitive environment, our legislative environment, what is happening around the world. And then how do we actually develop, for example, an employee value proposition that ensures that we attract the right people for the SABC and we are able to retain them. Right?
Yes.
And because we are really fighting for talent, our world is very disrupted from a technology perspective. The type of skill set that you require to take the SABC forward is not necessarily the type of skill set that you required in 1990.
Right.
And that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
And then another thing you need to look at is representation. I always tell the teams that the SABC's median age is 27.4 years old, meaning the majority of South Africans are below the age of 28. And what does it require then for institutions such as the SABC to be relevant to those audiences and also ensure that your employee, your workforce reflects society? And that's been a journey that we've had to undergo because SABC went through a very brutal Section 189 process a couple of years ago. The SABC is unfunded, and therefore our employees work in an environment where they have to deal with, let's say, technology that has reached its end of life long ago.
True.
And every day they wake up and have to make it work.
Yes.
And those are the people who come to the SABC, resilient. I always say people at the SABC don't work here for the salary. They can earn better money elsewhere. That's a fact.
Yeah.
If you start looking at it from that perspective, we've got global organizations in South Africa that compete with us, so they can apply their talent elsewhere. They work here because they understand the mission at stake in terms of the fact of the role this institution plays in this country. And therefore, then how do we ensure that as an institution we don't take that for granted? And we've been working very closely as EXCO and the board saying, how do you really develop this employee value proposition, taking into consideration that you don't have the resources that a lot of other organizations have in terms of building that?
Yeah.
How do we create a better work environment, a safer space for people to work? How do we actually bring in the right leaders that are going to lead this institution? So those are really the questions we've been grappling with, and we've seen some progress. When I arrived at the SABC, our employees had not been receiving salary increases for 3 years, and we we were not making a profit. In fact, the previous year we had declared a loss of close to 800 million rand. And when I came in, the first thing I had to deal with were labor issues. And that's what really took a lot of my time, engaging with the unions and trying to get an understanding and trying to get a consensus in terms of the fact that we were all here to make this work, you know?
Yes.
And that was not an easy task by any means, you know. So, and we brought in some very brilliant people in terms of leaders, you know. For example, our chief of HR, who had a great understanding of what was required, who had a very tough job ahead of her. And as you can see, we've got some amazing women at SABC
Absolutely.
in leadership positions. You know, Ms. Nada was speaking earlier. And therefore, we were tasked really with stabilizing the institution and ensuring that we don't end up with labor challenges where our people go on strike, etc. And it was very hard. And I always say that many a time if I've woken up and read about the obituary of the SABC, I always say that we are like Mark Twain, where the reports of our death is greatly exaggerated, you know. So quite a lot of the time you wake up and there's the obituary. But we've really strengthened this institution and really driven a coalition of commitment to the cause. And we have worked hard to ensure that we give those salary increases. Under very tough circumstances, I always say that we've done such a good job of, for example, managing our costs and reinvesting those savings in our people, because that was for us the primary, because I always say SABC people are the foundation. We are in the people business, Joanne. If you look at yourself every day, people wake up to listen to you, to the person. We don't sell products. You know, so we don't do that. We sell emotion. We sell relationships. That's what we sell, and those relationships are created by our employees, by the talent that we have. So, and something that the recognition that, in fact, the most important investment at SABC is its people. It's not the equipment. It's the people, because it's the people that actually make the equipment come alive. And this is a journey that we haven't arrived yet. It's a process. It's a journey for us to really work together and have that common understanding. We still have people who want to pull away. And I always say at EXCO, once we've decided to go north, we go north. Even if you were trying to argue for us to go northwest, you know, I always say you have a chance to argue your point. But once we've made the decision, we've made it as a collective, and we are all accountable for it. And that's what's important. So, and one of the key things that we really are looking at is really driving high performance. Because to compete in the world that we compete in, we are not seen as just a public broadcaster. We have to compete commercially.
Yes.
You know, the SABCs, if you look just at our financial framework, our funding, SABC is truly a commercial entity. It's not ideal, but we are literally the only public broadcaster in the world that's driven by commercial activities. More than 80% of our revenue comes from our commercial activities. Because by itself, the SABC was structured in a sense that the funding was supposed to come from the TV licensing.
Yes.
But we know that we have an 85% evasion rate. People in South Africa don't pay for their TV licenses, unlike the BBC, unlike in other countries, where even though it's first world countries, it's highly funded by the state and by the people of the country. We, on the other hand, have to compete with commercial institutions for advertising, for sponsorship, and any other commercial activity.
Let me ask you on that note, because you spoke about the changing industry. It's a changing market that's consuming media. And just this week, we've been reminded of the jobs bloodbath in the local media industry. How does the SABC's model, its funding model, need to change to keep up and to become profitable in the next few years?
You know, so I think the most important thing is that there needs to be a recognition about the role that the SABC plays in South African society. For me, what we currently have to do is take our commercial revenue to fund the public mandate in a development state. Mm-hmm. We talk about a development state. We talk about, you know, the MTDP targets. We talk about the fact that we live in in a country where, let's be genuine, the majority of our people rely on the SABC to be informed and educated.
Yes.
Now, if the purpose of the SABC is simply to drive profitability, then we've lost sight of what the public mandate is all about. We are in a situation where, yes, that's what we have to do because we don't have a choice. But ideally, we are asking for legislative parity. The SABC is not coming with a begging bowl. In fact, we are capable of driving the profitability of this institution. We do it on a daily basis, despite the handcuffs that we have. Now, Joanne, the difference between us and our competitors is that the public mandate is onerous and it's descriptive and prescriptive in the manner in which the SABC has to operate. Now, let's take SABC 1 as an example. Mm-hmm. We know that prime time is a period in which every broadcaster competes on audiences and revenue. But unlike anyone else, during prime time, the SABC has obligations in terms of our, ICASA licensing conditions to deliver on certain requirements, whether it's language requirements, etc. No one else has that. Yes. So they can do as they please and they can monetize as much as they want, where we know perhaps what audiences want, we know, in terms of the demographics, we have the insights, we have, but the reality is that at a certain time, you have to cut and bring in the content that is required to drive the public mandate and those ICASA requirements. Right. But you are still expected to compete at the same level as the commercial institutions.
Do you think that's adequately taken into account? Is ICASA and is government considering that when it looks at how we manage our funding?
No, it's not. It's genuinely not taken into account because the context is go and collect TV license revenue. That is the context. And people are saying, but I don't watch TV. Yeah. I'm streaming. I'm watching from the palm of my hand. I don't have a big screen on the wall that I'm watching. So that is not taken into account in the discourse that is currently taking place. And I think, in fact, the challenge that we have is that even our own citizens don't take that into account. In the fact that when we say pay your TV license, it's not because we're trying to pay ourselves a salary. It's because we are funding this public mandate. That is so crucial. Yeah. So for me, that is, we've been spending a lot of time to Nada's earlier point of building that coalition, that burning platform to say, let's gain an understanding of this funding model. Let's gain an understanding of the fact that the Broadcasting Act that really dictates how we run this organization is outdated. Disruption has taken place. Consumer behavior has changed. It's never going to go back. I always say, we're never going to go back to pre-COVID days. It's never going to happen. Yeah. Transformation has taken place, and we need to move with it. And we've been unable to invest ahead of the curve. But despite this, I must say to you, Joanne, there's good news because we've got green shoots. We've invested, for example, the SABC Plus OTT streaming platform, which is the fastest growing streaming platform.
Yes, 3 million registered users. Is that right?
And let me tell you something very interesting is that SABC Plus's registrations are driven by sports activity. We've just had the World Cup, very successful broadcast. Really want to extend my gratitude and appreciation to the sports team. Again, driven by a woman, Ms. Keletsio Trotranyo.
No coincidence.
No coincidence that we surround ourselves with powerful women. And that's how we delivered on the 3, and we managed to break the 3 million mark. But Joanne, let me tell you something that's critical here is that we have what we call sports of national interest, whereby the SABC is obligated to broadcast that sport. But we all know that sport is very commercial because at the end of the day, rights holders have to develop a quality premium product for ourselves to watch sport.
Yes.
The rugby players, the football players, the athletes have to be paid. And we know that the greatest income from sports comes from broadcast income, from broadcast rights.
Sponsorships,
And therefore, for the SABC to broadcast sports, the SABC has to compete in the open market. There isn't a discount for the SABC. So it means that we have to actually have the commercial muscle to be able to bid for those rights and commercialize and monetize those opportunities. And for me, that's the ecosystem that I don't think we are having enough discourse in terms of how then people get to witness Bafana Beating Korea.
Yeah.
On free-to-air, on the public broadcaster. It's because it's a commercial, a transaction that had to take place for us to go to FIFA and buy those rights for South Africans to be part and have an inclusive broadcast where they can witness a country moment. And that's the role that the SABC plays. And so your question, I don't believe there's enough understanding of the world in which we exist and what we do on a daily basis to orchestrate this ecosystem to deliver to our citizens, which are the most important shareholders of this institution.
Spot on. Some lovely messages coming in, and one of them says, absolutely love Nomsa, not only having her as a family friend, but as an accountant. I have met 2 small business owners who have expressed how she gave them a foot in the door, allowing them to be the success they are today. She is an inspiration, says Nka. I mean, I find that really important for women like us who've been privileged enough to move into these spaces and be able to own them in certain ways, to be able to give a foot up and pay it forward to others, especially other women who deserve that opportunity. How important is that to you as a leader? It's
important to me because we sit here today because other women did that for us.
Yes.
Right, I said earlier, women who instilled confidence, who opened the doors for us, and they ensured that the doors remained open. So one of the key things for me is about succession and ensuring that we build a pipeline of talent and we give opportunity. Because for me, if you can be as brilliant as you can, but if no one gives you the opportunity, you never really can realize what you're capable of. And that is why I often say that I do really appreciate the whole issue of having mentorship and being developed. I think it plays a critical role. However, I think it needs to be augmented with sponsorship. Because I think with sponsorship, doors get opened for you, people advocate for you in rooms that you are not in, which is very important. And it's something that men have done very well for themselves. Because men actually promote other men invite other men to the table, So for me, it's been very important that I open up the door for young people, for women, because I know that if I don't do it, who must do it? So I think we are tasked, Joanne, in the positions that we sit in to develop the pipeline and the institutions that we lead. We must actually recognize that we are here to basically, we are custodians of these institutions, and we have to leave them in a better way than we found it. And therefore, we must bring in the people who are going to actually take over after us and, play it forward and ensure that these institutions are there for 90 more years and being relevant in the audiences that they're going to serve then. So it's something that I've been very deliberate about giving those chances and actually changing the dynamic and changing the color, bringing in the diversity. Because by bringing in the diversity, we're bringing in different perspectives.
Yes.
And we're building a greater thinking engine. And for me, that's an exciting opportunity when you come across that and you're able to actually also empower yourself in reverse by learning from others. Because I also think mentorship is also in reverse. We learn from younger people.
Yeah. I want to ask you about this because this comes up in a message that was sent to us. Congratulations, Nomsa, on successfully guiding SABC from a critical day one emergency to a stable and secure operational state. What do you think Ma Chabeli would say if she was still here today, and which of her character traits have you leaned into when the going gets tough, says Helen Dinawane?
Oh, wow. So my mom passed away last year, and she was my greatest fan. I always say she was always the one who was waving the flag. And I'll tell you a joke. when I was appointed at SABC, you can imagine it's breaking news. And she phones me and she says, "Oh, I'm so tired of these congratulations." So she owned it.
I love
She
that.
was the
I
one
love
being
that.
congratulated.
Basking in your reflected
Basking
glory.
in that reflection. But that's what it's about. You know, I think our success must rub off each other.
Yeah.
I think, you know, she used to say that we fought for representation and we fought for a seat at the table. What she always used to challenge me with, she said, but now we must ask ourselves, now that we had a seat at the table, what did we do with it? And that's what she would ask. She would say, what impact have you made? What legacy are you leaving? So that's what's important. I think that's what she would say. She would say, yes, you are here now, but what institution are you going to leave for the next generation?
And which is a wonderful thought to start wrapping up our conversation with. I just want to ask you, this is such a tough job, and it must be a draining job. What do you do for fun?
I'm
Is there time for fun?
I'm a massive football fan.
Are you?
Yes,
Are
and
you going to confess to being an Arsenal fan?
I'm a Ghana through and through. I recently, my team, they know I went on a certain site. You see, if they paid for advertising, I'd be saying their name. I went on a site, I booked myself a plane ticket to travel to Budapest to watch Arsenal in the Champions League final. So I'm a big football fan.
Let's listen into this.
Fine delivery, fine header. And the noise around the stadium is deafening. Well, that's what it means to this team. Arsenal have gone for the short corner nearly every time so far, and that delivery from Saka was on the money. And Havertz, right place, right time. Good header. No one's going to stop him there. But it's all about the ball into the box. It's all about Saka, who I think has had a great first half. You see the delivery right on the money. Look at Havertz, rises above everybody. No one's stopping that from hitting the back of the net. They kept it up for 30 plus minutes, Burnley, but couldn't hold on forever.
Arsenal Premier League champions. Have those 4 words sunk in?
Yeah, it's incredible to hear them, especially understanding the journey, the manner that we've done it, and how many people has been involved and waiting for so long to accomplish that goal. You don't realize it, probably. It's one of the best feelings I ever had. Suddenly the magic happened. My oldest son opened the garden door. He started to run towards me. He started to cry. He gave me a hug and said, "We are champions, Daddy."
And of course, that was a moment of glory for you and your team, Nomsa. But it also reminds me of our job as broadcasters, why we do what we do. It's because it really goes to the heart of who we are. We talk to the core of human beings through this medium. Your closing thoughts on the importance of what we're doing here and our mission going forward.
Joanne, we have to continue in our mission to educate and inform South Africans. And importantly, we have to strengthen public institutions. And as South Africans, we must realize we play a very important role in the strengthening of those institutions. We shouldn't leave it just up to the legislators to do it for us. We must actively participate in that. It's not just Nomsa's job or SABC's leadership job, but it's the role of all South Africans to jealously guard these institutions, because they play a very big role in our society, in driving inclusivity, in ensuring that everybody participates in nation moments. You've played an Arsenal clip, but it's us as broadcasters who bring that memory into this country. We are part of South Africa's, if you look at our archives, that's where South Africa's collective memory sits. And it should never be taken lightly, because it really drives who we become going forward. And that's really what I'd like to close off our discussions with, and to say that as we, traverse this Women's Month, we need to recognize the role that women have played in society from that famous march that we keep on, every time we celebrate in August, and what women have done to drive our dignity, to ensure that we are given the chance and that we lead institutions and we preserve them for collective memory.
Well, we take up the mantle indeed, and thank you for doing so as the GCEO of the SABC. Thank you for making the time to come and speak to us today, and we wish you well in your journey going forward, in which you serve the entire country in this role. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is where we wrap up our program for today. Yes, may we have a round of applause from our audience, please? Thank you, and I hope you're applauding at home or wherever you're listening from. Thank you so much for listening into the Daily Discourse today, or watching it, as the case may be, from wherever you are. Have a wonderful, safe weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.